Thank you for joining me today. Whether you're here live or you're listening to the recording, I just appreciate your time because I know that it's very valuable and you're all very busy. We are here for session two of Interoception. Today, we are going to be talking about strategies for noticing body signals. Last session, we really dove into like what is interoception, and how does it affect the students that we serve. Sorry, I just lost the chat. So I just want to pull that up and make sure I have that open. Okay, so if you're someone that likes to know what to expect, kind of outlined what I intend or how I would love to spend the time with you, I'm going to offer a quick group reflection. I'd like to hear from some of you that might have been digesting the last session and see if any of you have been applying or just like more curious about interoception. And then we're going to just really quickly refresh body, emotion, action connections because that's going to then set the framework for my favorite two strategies that we'll talk about today, and that those are for noticing body signals. We're going to talk about some mini case studies about how to adapt those two body signal or those two strategies. And then if we have time, we'll do some more Q&A, but like Deb said, we'll have that sprinkled throughout as well. So as I mentioned, I would love to hear from you first. My first question last session, we really talked about the impact of lived experience on the interoceptive development and how there's a lot of lived experiences that really derail body listening or that IA experience. So we have like societal messaging, trauma we talked about and how that can derail IA. There's a lot of gaslighting, compliance approaches used, emotion teaching approaches. So I'm just curious if any of you found yourself thinking about this. Have you noticed the impact of some of these things in your daily lives or with your students and clients? So I'll turn things over. If you want to share in the chat or if you also want to raise your hand, it would be great to unmic and I'd love to just hear from you.
I'll speak up. Hi there, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming back again. Um, I right after the last session, I work in early intervention, early childhood, and one of the things that I really noticed is that when some of our kids that are autistic are really starting to melt down, um, some of the staff are saying things like, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay." And it helps this particular child to, he gets that and he says, "I'm okay, I'm okay." But I'm hoping that by being here today, that I will get some better ideas for him and, so many of the kids that I serve, to really figure out what is going to work with them without me or staff members telling them that they're okay when they are clearly not okay. So I've really been thinking about what I'm saying to kids. I'm paying attention to what other people are saying to kids. And yeah. So there, that's my takeaway from the first one.
Oh, you're giving me like goosebumps, like talk about interoceptive feels. It makes me first of all think like, I mean, this is coming from such a loving place, right? We desperately want our young people to feel okay. We're coming probably to that experience trying to offer them comfort, but like you're saying, it's actually dismissing their internal experience. And there's slight shifts in what we can be saying and responding in those moments rather than saying you're okay because you're obviously noticing that they're not, like we could say things like I'm here with you or let's try to figure this out together. So that way we're still acknowledging their discomfort. We're we're still acknowledging their experience, but we're still providing, I think, the reason behind what it is, like the reason why we're saying you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Like, how do we just shift that and give our colleagues maybe some updated scripts? And to be honest, like, there's no like formula to follow here. Like this is all like so new. It's really being pushed by many advocates that have had these experiences before. And like, what are the scripts we shift to? How do we get more curiosity? How do we get more validation? So I just your example is so perfect. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so I see a couple things. Oh, I don't know where the conversation starts here. I think with Kyla, um, I see you saying, yes, you're working with a student who becomes upset when he needs to have a bowel movement. He is not aware of what this means. So you're seeing potentially IA come to light there and maybe some opportunities for some respectful curiosity. And it might not stick right away, but at least it's giving us something to tap into there, like wondering what's happening in the body, maybe getting more people to model their internal experiences around him. I know it kind of gets a little funny if we're modeling like our need to poop. So you have to pull in the safe people there of who can be modeling that feeling of needing to poop, but really working through that with curiosity. So I love that you're seeing that. Brittany is seeing you saying you're a student you're working with is used to someone always telling her how she feels. It's been challenging getting her to really clue into her body versus looking to charts and adults to answer for her. Oh, Brittany, this speaks to why interoception work can sometimes take time because a lot of times it's undoing accidental approaches in the past. Like, I mean, these approaches have good intentions many times behind them, but there's a lot of undoing before we can really move our students forward and convince them to trust their bodies again. So I thank you for sharing that. So I see Lori saying, I found myself blown away by how often we tell our students how they are feeling instead of being curious about what they're experiencing. Yes, I mean, I'm sensing a theme here. So I'm so glad that this was really sticking. Jessica saying, your students here tend to lash out when it's quiet and calm as their regular living state tends to be loud and chaotic, so they are uncomfortable with what would be considered that baseline norm. Yeah, I see this quite a bit in the clients I serve. Their way of so many of our students need predictability, and so in an effort to make their world as predictable as possible, many times they do seek out dysregulation. They do seek out certain steps that activate their behavior plan because that is a unfortunate unfortunately, that is their predictability. That is their way to know what to expect. So really shifting that narrative and shifting that narrative begins with you being aware of it. So I really love your point and how you're seeing that. Um, Betty, oh, and I also want to say that there's a lot of time, a lot of some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we can work on updating those interoception predictions so that that predictive state becomes something that is more regulating to their bodies. Um, Betty saying people seem to have a hard time with anyone who is existing in public who is not okay. Truth. I don't have anything more to say, Betty. That's pretty powerful. That is very, very true. And maybe, I don't know why. I think there's probably a lot of reasons why there, but maybe it's because that is like, it's like kind of an uncomfortable situation for other people sometimes. And how do we empower our colleagues and family members to have some strategies to work within those moments when someone is not okay? Yeah, because the alternative is accidental dismissal many times of that internal experience. Okay, so I'm just going to take one more because I see a lot here. Kara, since the last session, I've tuned in a lot more when students note physical pain in non-preferred uncomfortable situations or during task when they are increased performance demands. Yay, yay, yay. Because I feel like that's going to be the baseline then for your curiosity. So you're noticing this discomfort, you're noticing the context of what's going around it. If the students can tell you a little bit more about what's going on, great. If they can't, that's okay too, because then we can make some respectful guesses about what could be the source of that discomfort and how can we offer more co-regulation? How can we adjust our behavior? How can we the environment around that person, including the people in the environment, to better meet their interoceptive needs. Um, so, okay, second question, just because I wanted, I actually not going to ask the second question because I actually heard your answers in some of these, but I was curious if you have tried any of the restoring strategies like modeling your own IA process or updating emotion teaching. I see a lot of curiosity there. I see a lot of you saying you're seeing these things happening, and what can you do differently? I just want to make sure. I see John saying that you've used the I wonder phrasing. Yay. So I'm going to just dive into the strategies just so we have enough time. And then if we have time, I want to circle back and read the rest of what's here. Okay. So just a quick refresher, just so the strategies make sense to you that we're going to talk about. Last time we talked about interoceptive awareness and how it's really about helping people to really understand their body, emotion, action connection. So being able to notice those body signals is the start. Like that's where we're going to start. And then we can use those body signals as clues to their emotions. And then we can use strategies to help them discover ways to regulate those body signals, ways that are a meaning to their body, that are effective to their own unique inner experience, not a set of memorized coping strategies. It's all like really unique and individualized to each person. So, how do we start this process? What can we do to start helping our clients or students begin to notice more body signals? So this framework for the strategies I'm going to give you is coming from a resource called the Interoception Curriculum, and that curriculum is divided into three parts. So section one is body, section two is emotion, section three is action. I know I heard from a few of you last time that you are using the curriculum, so that's why I wanted to kind of give you this like kind of framework. But if you don't have the curriculum, my job is to give you my favorite two strategies from there that will hopefully help you get this work started and make some big changes and big movement forward. So these strategies that I'm going to offer you today are from a set of strategies we call IA builders or interoceptive awareness builders. All of these IA builders are are forms of adapted body mindfulness. And the reason why we're using body mindfulness, well, first, what that means is just inviting people to pay attention to how their body feels in the present moment. Like that's what I mean by body mindfulness. Um, Body mindfulness is very, um, very prominent in the interoception research as a very clear evidence-based strategy for enhancing IA. So I read all these studies, there's lots of them out there, saying that body mindfulness enhances IA, but here's what happened a long time ago. A lot of my clients, like they, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons, traditional, like westernized body mindfulness was not a match for them. It wasn't accessible many times. It wasn't successful many times. Body mindfulness many times is very abstract. It requires a lot of attention, which oftentimes is a very tricky area for a lot of my clients. So there's a lot of barriers. So what we did is we adapted it. We adapted this body mindfulness to make it more accessible and successful for a wider variety of people. So just some of the ways we've adapted body mindfulness is that we are chunking this work into one body part at a time. So we'll do playful things to notice, like how do your hands feel, or how do your feet feel, or how does your nose feel, or your heart feel. So we're trying to chunk it into one body part at a time to kind of reduce that cognitive load rather than scanning through your entire body. That can be really tricky for some people. We also, you're going to see this come to light today. We are using strategies that are attempting to evoke a stronger sensation in the body to help capture that attention. And we're doing this in playful ways. We don't want to wait until someone's like going towards dysregulation when they probably are feeling stronger sensations in their body and say, how does your body feel? Because that's probably not going to be well received, right? That person probably doesn't even have the resources in that moment to notice their body, let alone even want to notice how their body feels. So we're going to wait till they're regulated and we're going to use playful ways to evoke sensation. Um, we also are going to be learning about our body signals while we are experiencing them. We're not going to talk about like how do you think your hands might feel when you go out on a cold day? We're going to go out on a cold day and we're going to notice how our hands feel. We have lots of visual and language supports embedded within this work. I'll show you some of those. And again, listen, this is really intended to be fun and playful. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into these two IA builders I keep referring to. And just to give you orientation, I pulled this from the Interoception curriculum for you, so you have it for free. But this is the order of body parts that we focus on in section 1 of the book. So we have 15 different body parts, and we start by working with some outside body parts first. So noticing how your hands feel, or noticing how your feet feel, or your mouth, or your eyes. And then we work our way into inside body parts. So noticing how your muscles feel, or your lungs, or your heart, your brain, etc. We have tried a lot of different orders of body parts. It's really hard to like say that something works for every single person, but the general rule of thumb, this has been really helpful because the outside body parts tend to be a little bit more concrete because while working on noticing how they feel, we can also see them. We can see our hands while we're noticing how they feel. So it tends to be a little bit more concrete before moving into the inside of the body and inviting them to notice body parts that now they can't see. Tends to be a lot more abstract. Now, all of our IA builders, the entire curriculum is intended to be adaptable. So that includes the amount of body parts that you're focusing on. So let's just say perhaps you're working with clients that are maybe like really little, or maybe cognitively they won't be able to handle noticing 15 different body parts right now. And that's okay. So we just tend to, with littles, we really focus on those outside body parts first. They tend to be a little bit more successful. We also will prioritize what body parts we want to work on. And I always think about like, why am I even wanting to do this work? So like I give this example quite a bit. Like there's a client that I've known for years and years, and he's a non-speaking autistic middle schooler now. And we wanted to do the interoception work to help empower him with more knowledge about his body for like managing when he gets overwhelmed. And so he's not able to tell us insights really into his inner experience. And so we had to make some respectful guesses. And what we see him doing when he starts to get overwhelmed is he starts pacing back and forth. He starts squeezing his hands really hard. Like sometimes his nails will be digging into his skin, and his vocalizations get very loud. So the three body parts that we're working on with him are noticing how your hands feel, your feet feel, and your voice sounds. So those are the only three body parts we're working on, and that's okay. Like you can adapt to this. What I do like to do is I try to get to all 15 different body parts if someone can handle that, if it's not too much or overwhelming, because we want to eventually give them the concept of this is how my entire body feels. Okay, so your step 1 is to pick the body part that you're going to start with. So what body part will that be? So you have that in your mind, and then you move into the first IA builder. And this is something called the descriptor menu. And we have two different ways of creating a descriptor menu. So the first is when we can generate ideas together with the learner or in a classroom with a group of learners. And what we're trying to do with this descriptor menu is create a menu, like a visual support of words that can be used to describe the way the hands or whatever body part it is can feel. So there's an example here on the screen. This was a list generated by a group of my clients, and we were introducing the lesson like, today we're going to do some fun stuff to know how our hands feel, and who can tell me different ways your hands can feel. And so we generated this list. I wrote them down so that I was creating a visual support. This descriptor menu is going to be really important when we move to the next IA builder. So you just want to make sure you're writing this down on a board, a whiteboard, or piece of paper, a post-it note. You'll see I have an example of a post-it note version. Just make a visual support so that that language support will be there for the next IA builder. In all of these IA builders, we accept all answers, and you probably will hear some very clever, maybe even surprising ways that people describe the way their body feels. We're going to accept every answer. Every answer is valid. Every person deserves to have their internal experience validated. So we generate this list, and I think I just gave you more examples here of what these can look like. So the post-it note example is on the top right of the screen, and that was from a 7-year-old client I work privately with in his home, and we were starting on the eyes. And so these are the words that he gave me, the ways his eyes can feel. I will tell you, just because someone can memorize descriptor words and give them to you in a list doesn't mean they're actually able to notice these sensations in the moment. That's just kind of a good thing to keep in mind. But my client, he loves when I draw. I think he's secretly teasing me and making fun of my drawings, but that's fine. I don't care. Like I just want to hook him in and have lots of fun with him. So he gives me the word, I draw my very best interpretation of that sensation. So we have a little descriptor menu there started on a post-it note. There's an example here on the bottom right. This was from a board in a classroom. This is an autistic support classroom, and the classroom teacher was working on lungs and brainstorming this list with the students. They said your lungs can feel dead, tickly, tired, coughing, full of ashes and tar, fine, sore, and full of air. So very clever ways here. We're accepting all answers. Every answer gets validated. Okay, so we have the brainstorming version, but you also, like, I have clients that I'm not going to be able to sit down and, brainstorm a list with them, and that's okay. So then I'm just going to create this descriptor menu ahead of time. Now, we do have menus available in the curriculum that you can just print and go, but I'm going to show you how to create these without the curriculum as well. I just wanted to hone you in on a couple things on this slide. So we do have an example here in the very middle, which is just a list of words. And that's opposed to the two options on the right, which have descriptor words matched with images. And originally in my work, I thought this would be really good for kids that were pre-readers or adults that are pre-readers. However, what we've learned over time is that the version of the descriptor menu that has a word matched with some kind of visual or picture or image is helpful for a lot of people, not just pre-readers, people that can read, um, people that are very visual in nature. They need a visual representation of that word. Very helpful. So that's just a little tidbit to keep in mind. Um, and sometimes all of this language is a little too much for where a person is. So sometimes my descriptor menu, like I always try the kind on the right first. I'm presuming competence. I want to see what I can get. I'm always going to have those available. But sometimes I'll play around with trying to take some of that language out and like just make a little menu saying like, ooh, like, yes, I like this. My body feels comfortable right now. And ew, no, thank you. Yuck. My body doesn't like this. My body is uncomfortable, to see if I can just start to like even get that discrimination within their body of like, ooh, this feels really, really awesome to my body, and ooh, I don't like this in my body. So creating a menu there. Um, okay, so just a couple more examples. The version on the left, I use Google Images. You can use Boardmaker, like really whatever you use to create your existing visual supports. And then I just had another example here of feeling comfortable and uncomfortable. So really, you can brainstorm the descriptor menu or create it yourself. Oh, I forgot to put this in here. Also, if you're supporting non-speaking clients and they have communication systems, make sure you're embedding those descriptor menus into their communication system. And that's going to look so different depending on what system they're using, how it's organized. But I just really encourage body parts being in each person's communication system, as well as just some basic ways of them being able to describe the way those body parts feel. This can be a slow build over time to expand that interoception vocabulary, but I do encourage teams to like make sure you collaborate with all people on the team. Especially, I saw some AAC coaches here and SLPs and whoever is the lead point to really work together to make sure that this ability to describe or communicate the way the body parts feel is embedded in a way that they're familiar with in their communication system. And I see Becky saying you partnered with your AT specialist to add these to their students' AAC devices. Perfect. That's great. Okay, so then we have the descriptor menus in place. And now we're going to move on to the next IA builder. And this is probably 100 different strategies in one. These are called focus area experiments. And this is the core of the work. So these are activities that playfully evoke a stronger sensation in order to give practice noticing how that body part feels. And if they're ready for it, not everyone is ready for it. If they're ready for it, give them practice describing how that body part feels. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But first, let me give you some examples of experiments. So number one here on the screen is there's a bowl of ice, and my client loves beads. So he was like playfully picking out the beads out of the bowl of ice before we built something. And we were wondering out loud, like, I wonder how your hand feels right now. So we were inviting him to notice how his hand felt while he was putting his hand in that bowl of ice and getting his beads. Now, he is a non-speaking client. I don't know for sure that he's noticing his hands. I'm presuming competence. I am putting my curiosity out into the world. I want him to know that I am wondering about his inside. Um, and we have the communication supports there. We have the descriptor menu there. We're modeling our own experience. Like, oh, my hands feel like numb. I wonder if that's same or different for you. I'm pointing to his communication system, modeling that process for him. Do I know if he's soaking any of this in? I do not. I am, again, presuming competence. The experiment number two is squeezing different kinds of stress balls. And we did this in a small group, and we had different stress balls, and then the students got to notice, and they were ready for describing here, describe the different ways their hands felt. And they noticed that their hands felt differently when they would squeeze each different stress ball. So one would make their hand feel a certain way, but then when they squeeze the next stress ball, it would be different. So it turned into a lot of different focus area experiments, all within one idea. So there we're giving practice noticing how the hands feel, but also describing. Number three is hand warmers. So we were passing around hand warmers and noticing how our hands felt. Number four is just a battery operated fan. Number five is a water mister. Number six are frozen grapes at snack time and noticing how our hands feel before eating them. So there's a lot of different experiment ideas out there. We're going to talk a little bit more about that together as a group. But the moral of the story here is that we're working on evoking stronger sensations within that body part to give safe practice, noticing, and if they're ready for it, describing how that body part feels. So I'd like to invite you to do a couple experiments with me. You'll be the kind of the case study here. And just before I invite you to try the first experiment, just a reminder from last time that that there's no wrong interoception experience. And so we're most likely going to see a lot of variance in our experiences during these activities. So let's see here. Okay, so the third experiment on this list. So shake your hands fast. And if you want to join me, please feel free. So shake your hands fast and notice your hands. Okay. And if anyone would like to share what they noticed in their hands, practice describing it, please feel free to put it in the chat. My hands felt cold and sore. I see John saying cold, full of blood, full, light pressure, tingly, felt heavy, fuzzy, tingly, loose but heavy, tingly, heavy, hurt, heavy, buzzy, tingly, loose, full, tingly. Oh, sorry, it's going very fast now. Swooshy, buzzing, cold, tingly, flexible, snappy. So look at all the very different experiences. You're all correct and valid in your experience. We accept all answers. We validate each answer we hear. And Laura, I see yours coming in. It makes my joints hurt and my hands feel heavy. Okay, so again, we have some overlap, but also some very different experiences. You're all correct and valid in that experience. So we want to really make a big deal out of making sure that each person feels validated. All right, let's do one more. Okay, the very last one on here. We won't do a whole 30 seconds, but if you want to rest your hands like on your lap or the table in front of you, if you have one, and we're going to keep your hands as still as a statue for 10 seconds. So try really hard not to move them. And notice how your hands feel. Okay. Anyone want to share in the chat what you noticed? Want to move, antsy, stiff, pulsing, vibrating, tense, heavy, warm, buzzy, paranoid, anxious, let down, relax, warm and buzzy, relax, warm, happy, cold, stiff, want to move, right hand heavy, left hand relaxed. Sydney, I liked how you divided that up. Tingly, my brain hurts to keep them still from Kathy. So all very valid experiences, and thank you for sharing with me. Um, I was doing this experiment with a 7-year-old client, and he was a private client, so it was his mom and me and him all doing this experiment. And he's so adorable, and he was working so hard to keep his hands as still as possible. And I didn't see them move one time. And so at the end, we're like, what did you notice about your hands? And he's like, my hands were wiggly. And, if I was coming from kind of like a behaviorist perspective and using observable behavior, I could have easily shut that down and said, no, like I didn't observe your hands moving. There's no way that they were wiggly. But because we're in the business of getting curious, of validating each person's internal experience, we were like, that's such a cool word. Thanks for sharing. And he's someone that I can occasionally get a little more from. So I was like, oh, like, cool, like wiggly. Can you tell me more about that? And he says to his mom and me, he says, that's the way the inside of my body feels all day long at school. And like that was such a profound insight for us because what is happening with him is that he goes to school all day and he is described as like the picture perfect student. He sits in his chair, does his work, participates in the classroom, follows the rules. So he is working so hard to hold it together, so hard to mask this internal experience of like wiggly and crawling out of his skin essentially. And that little bit of insight. Oh, and then I forgot to say, like, so he gets through his school day, like, and everyone's saying like he's great, and he gets home at the end of the day, and it's just meltdown city the rest of the night. Like he's just exhausted from holding it together, from masking that internal experience. Yes, Kirsten, a master masker and like a product of compliance, right? Like he is so focused on the rules and like what other people are thinking about him that he is working so hard to ignore what his body is telling him. His body is telling him like, I need to move. I need more. I need something more from my body in order for me to participate comfortably in the classroom. So that little bit of insight allowed us to go back to the school, and we're really working on increasing regulation for all students in that class. It's getting a little better. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Like we still have a long way to go, but he does have pockets of regulation at home now in the evening where his family is able to connect a little bit more. We have some ways to go, but that little bit of insight. So stay open to the insights that you might gain from these focus area experiments. And I see a couple things coming into the chat, but just let me finish up my thoughts here on the experiments, and then I'll see if there's questions there. I kind of divided this out because we're talking about how the experiments, there's two different skills it's allowing for practice. So we're giving practice noticing how that body part feels within a safe and validating space. I try to switch up my language a little bit to see what sticks with each person. Like, so I might say like, I wonder how your hand feels right now. So I'm kind of taking the question out of it. So it's not so like sometimes questions can be really intimidating because they expect an answer, right? So I'm just like, I wonder how your hand's feeling right now. Or I might change that word feel. I might say like, what do you notice in your hands? Or I might model from my experience, like my hand feels tingly. I wonder if this feels same or different for you. Or I might be pointing to the descriptor menu while I'm modeling or using the same type of communication system they're used to it. And I'm modeling my feels through pointing or interacting with that device. Um, then for the describing part, we really try to find a way that really empowers someone to be able to really share what's happening in the inside. So it might be through speaking, right? Or typing like we did in the chat, like you're putting a word to it. But maybe that person needs to draw what they experience. Someone that I have been mentoring just was working with a student who has a lot of trauma, and they were not really feeling safe enough to, even though they have lots of mouth words, they can talk and talk and talk, to be able to put a word to their internal experience was not working. And so this OT started to invite the person to draw, and that has been so successful. So drawing can be a way, or coloring what you notice. Sometimes we'll use gestures like show me kind of with your body what you're noticing, or point to where you notice this in your body. Some things that I am very newly trying because I am working very hard on updating my knowledge with Gestalt language processors, especially in relation to interoception. We have a brand new course taught by two autistic SLPs on Gestalt language processing and interoception. So I'm a work in progress in this area, but I am trying different. Like I might offer for someone to find a song that matches what they're experiencing in their body, or a GIF, or a video, or a meme, or a picture on Google Images. So I'm just really trying any way I can to get insight into their inner world. So you can play around with so many different adaptations here to really try your best to get some of those insights. And just a couple more things. So we've already talked about how like these experiments are only invitations to participate. They're not demands that someone must complete. We have to allow for full autonomy in this interception work. If someone refuses our experiment, or they push it away, like that's them expressing and describing their internal experience, right? So how do we validate that, and then like kind of challenge ourselves to like, okay, what could I do to like adjust this to make it more comfortable for the person? We're only doing this work during periods of regulation. We're validating all responses. We're providing modeling, our own experience, but with that follow-up of curiosity. Just be really careful if you're modeling, that's amazing. Just making sure you're following it with curiosity about their experience. So what I mean by that is like saying like, my hands feel tingly right now, but I wonder if that's same or different for you. So I'm really pointing out that their experience might be very different from mine. Um, and we're providing lots of language and communication supports. And then the one more thing here, I think this is my last one, then we're going to go to the chat and see what questions are there. Um, this is just a really small thing, but it has made a big difference because I do have some clients that take the words I use very concretely. So if let's just say we're holding an ice cube, and I say like, how did I want to make sure I'm prompting them to notice the quality of their body, like to get them in their body. So I'll say something like, how does your hand feel while you're holding that ice cube? Versus I don't want to say, how does that ice cube feel? Because that's them really noticing the quality of the ice cube. It's kind of like taking them a little bit more out of their body to notice the ice cube, where I want them to notice their hand. I want them to notice their body and how their body feels. So just like really think very carefully about the language that you're using around this work, and it can really make a big deal. Um, okay, so I'm just going to pause here. I do have a couple more tips here because I wanted to make sure I gave you my two favorite strategies, but then I also want to talk about how to adapt them for different clients and case studies. And then I'm also going to then help you leave with a lot more ideas for focus area experiments. So can I pause here, and maybe Deb or Chandra, you could help me if, because I don't know, are there questions that I missed?
There are.
Well, I'm seeing, Kathy said many of our kids struggle to keep their bodies okay, and it keeps them from learning. And I think we can all relate to that. Um, Chelsea had a comment. I welcome you to unmute if you'd like to share, but she says her neurodivergent son said that he flaps because his wrists feel tight. And so that was just very insightful on, what his body was going through. There was another one. Kathy said that they often make students respond, and they'll just pick something to make us leave them alone.
Bingo, Kathy.
Mhm.
Yes. So
And
true.
I think too that sometimes they pick the last choice just because it's the one freshest in their memory.
Mhm.
Um, there was another one, and I'm looking to find it that said that some kids are uncomfortable with the discussion of how their bladder feels. And so they kind of respect that maybe that's not a topic they want to talk about. So are there strategies to help them? Because I think bladder is hard to ignore.
It is, and it's very important, obviously, for toileting. So, I mean, I guess there's a lot of ways you can adapt this, and these are probably things you're already thinking of. I many times don't do bladder if I'm in a classroom or if I'm in a group situation because that tends to be a more private body part. We're getting also ready to add, we're updating the curriculum. We're adding in a body part lesson on bowels too. So again, that probably would be more of a private body part. Sometimes if I'm doing this work in schools, I'll talk to the parents about doing more of the bladder, the bowels, that kind of stuff in the private comfort of their home because there's just I could probably do a whole hour session on this one topic, but there's just like elements of shame within, if someone's really struggling with toiling, it's just so layered. So yeah, you just really I like the point and you have to be really cautious about any body part you're offering, really. I always think about what body part I'm going to offer, and is this a body part that's going to hopefully feel safe to the person? Like many times, the mouth is lesson number 3. Sometimes I'll move that later in the work if I'm working with someone who I know like really struggles um, with feeding and like has a sensitive like to textures or temperatures or whatever. I'll move that body part down too. So I'm always thinking very critically about the body parts.
Well, and then Kyla asked, how do you help students with significant intellectual disabilities learn about those descriptor words, hot, cold, wiggly, without labeling what their experience is?
Yeah. I think just even you asking this question, like, hopefully will get you started. And we don't have like prescriptions for all of this yet. What we do know is it can be unhelpful because when we're labeling someone else's experience, which I hear that in your question, so just a lot of adult modeling around that person, and making sure that model is followed up with curiosity about their experience. You might not get a response, and that's okay. But I would be modeling in it, like if they have communication systems, making sure you're modeling your process using their communication style is so very important. And that might happen over and over and over and over again. I can't remember if I told this story last time because I've been so excited about it, but there's a school that I've been working with for quite a few years. It's a school for kids with very, very, very complex needs. All of them have intellectual disabilities, they're complex communicators, etc. And one of the students who's been doing interoception work with these therapists. A lot of them are OTs and SLPs in the group that I support. One of their students just recently pointed to his ear and said, "Oh, oh," like he was just making grunting noises. And it turned out he had an ear infection. And this is not a student that they thought was paying attention to the work. They weren't even sure if he was getting anything out of it. And he finally, first time ever, he was able to tell someone that his body was in pain. And he was able to get to the medical care he needed. Other time, like otherwise, they were guessing, they were watching changes for behavior. This is the first time, so they were just so excited. And sometimes, like we might not see those kinds of gains, and that's okay too. But we're trying our best. And Kyla, like it can be really hard when you just are not sure. At least it's hard for me when I'm not sure if my student is picking up what I'm throwing out into the world.
And I apologize if we missed any questions. It was drawn to my attention. Aaron was talking about what if a student doesn't attend to visual supports? And I think you're talking about some other type strategies, but can you address that another moment?
Yeah, so if they're not attending, um, So I think I would have to know a little bit more about that. Like, does it look like they're not attending? Because sometimes my students don't look like they're looking. Like I'm just modeling and they're like not even looking in my direction, or I'm modeling on an AAC device and they're not really looking in my direction. And then one day it's all of a sudden they're like paging through the page that I've been modeling for the last 2 months. And I'm like, oh, they were actually kind of noticing, but I just didn't look like they were. So I would have those visual supports there, but I'm not going to do it in a way where I'm like trying to like come into their personal space and say, you need to look at this. Like I'm just going to try, I just try my best and have those visual supports there. But I also do a lot of talking out loud. I try to balance it with not being too much talking where they're going to be auditorily overwhelmed, but I do a lot of talking out loud as well.
And I think you've kind of touched on this too. If we're doing these things in the school and it's not okay, it is okay not to address specific lessons. And I heard you saying depends on the student. And
Yeah, absolutely. And Kara, if you're not comfortable with it, like listen to your own interoceptive boundaries, like you should be doing work that you're comfortable with. So I appreciate that question very much.
and Lauren wants to know if you're using the visual descriptor menu. If a child uses a word that's not on the menu, do you add it?
Yes, Lauren, thank you for pointing that out. I forgot to say that, but I do. Those descriptor menus tend to be kind of a work in progress. And if I may, I'm just going to go back for a second. Whoops. The version I gave in the very beginning, where I was brainstorming with a group of kids. So the blue words were all words that they generated during, like when we were brainstorming the descriptor menu, and then we kept adding to it during the experiment. So the red and green words were words that were generated during experiments. So we just expanded that for them. So it's a really great question.
So please, if I missed any questions and it hasn't been answered yet, please bring it to my attention. Unmute yourself. Lots of comments happening. Don't
Great.
want to miss it.
Yep. Okay, a couple more tips, and we're going to generate some experiment ideas. And then we're going to continue talking about a couple more. Like I've been trying to sprinkle in a mini case studies of how to adapt this work for a variety of different students and clients. One thing I think about are the experiments that require like props, like a bowl of ice or an ice pack or hand warmers. Like these tend to be hands-on learning. They're great for people that need concrete hands-on opportunities to really engage them. But also the reality is like you have to put some forethought into having these things available, which isn't always a luxury I have. So there's benefits to experiments that have like these props and those that don't. Like when we were doing the shaking your hands fast or holding your hands as still as a statue, like you can kind of do that on the fly. You don't need anything special. So I really try to think about like, you know, what is realistic for me, but then also like what do my students need? Some of them need those props for the hands-on learning. Even my high schoolers that don't really need hands-on learning per se, but they're hooked into this work because I bring a bag of really weird things every week I come. And that's what hooks them into the work. So they like the props. They like the pop rocks. They like the hand warmers. They like the weird stuff I bring in. But like a lot of the gen ed teachers that I support, like they're not going to be able to have a bowl of ice for every single student in their classroom. Like that's not real. That's not realistic. So we work on a lot of the experiments that don't require anything special. So they can still like, do a 30-second experiment with their classroom, contribute to that work without a lot of extra burden on them. Um, I just wanted to focus or just give you a couple more where places to go for ideas for focus area experiments. So you don't need to have contrived experiments. There's lots of things happening in our daily lives that are probably evoking stronger sensations. So like, for example, we have this free resource. You can download it from my website for free. It's called Interoception Daily Activity List. I like to give this especially to caregivers at home. But it has 15 different menus. They are 15 different body part menus, and each menu gives some examples of things that might be already occurring in that person's day that serve as like natural focus area experiments or probably evoking stronger sensation. So like when a person is washing their hands or clapping or hanging from playground equipment or writing or typing or holding a cold or warm drink, eating finger foods. So there's so many opportunities during that day that could be a great time to wonder about that person's body. Like, oh, I wonder how your hands are feeling right now, or how do your hands feel right now while you're washing them? So these are really great times. Sometimes I'll work with families on just picking one thing in their day, and that one time during their day is the time where they're going to model their experience as well as wonder about their child's experience. So you can check that out. That's free. Um, we have a whole bunch more experiments. So if you have the curriculum, we have lists of experiments by body part. We also have interoception yoga cards and interoception exercise cards. But the reason I wanted to talk to you about them today is if you're someone that's using yoga, or if you're someone that's using exercise or movement breaks, anything like that, those are all focus area experiments. Just really shift your focus from doing the yoga, doing the exercise or assuming the yoga pose to inviting curiosity about how does your body feel while you're in cow pose? How does your body feel while you're doing wall push-ups? And if you're really following along with kind of the structure I gave you, get more specific. Like, how do your hands feel while you're doing wall push-ups? Or how do your hands feel while they're pressing into the mat during this pose? So really just being more explicit in inviting them into into their body, yoga, exercise, movement, all of those things are naturally occurring focus area experiments. Also, we have this book, but the only reason I want to tell you about this book is because I feel like this probably is happening, especially for some of you that are working with younger kids. We have this book called The Big Book of Interoception Games, but what we did here, and this might be possible, I mean, this is very possible. I know people are doing this without the book. Like, think about the games you're playing. Like following the leader or Simon Says or the freeze dance, and just put more of an interoception spin on it. So like if we're doing the freeze dance and the music pauses and we freeze, then we'll say like, oh, like I wonder how your hands feel right now, or how do your feet feel right now? So just really, using that language to really encourage them to notice and describe how their body parts feel, make these all focus experiments. So just try to find those windows of time that are already occurring for you, and how can you just give them a little bit more of an interoception spin? And if you can, oops, I don't know what was happening there. If you can, um, have those descriptor menus handy during these experiments. So I'd like to turn things over to you, and we can brainstorm a little bit. I know you all have different roles, different settings and age groups you're supporting, but let's think about some of the stuff that you already are doing that might serve as focus area experiments. So let's start with the body part of hands. What are some things that you're already doing with your clients, your students, that might be evoking stronger sensations in their hands? Yeah, Nicole, deep pressure for sure. Changing writing utensils, absolutely. Vibration, playground, monkey bars, um, visual exploration, art activities with glue, snack time foods, school moves, dots and squeezes, warm-ups before writing, cooking, manipulating dough or making slime, art projects, Play-Doh. Awesome ideas. They're all focus area experiments right there. Sensory time in class where we focus on a different material every week. And, yes, absolutely. Hand washing. All right, just for time's sake, let's switch to the mouth. What are some things that might be already happening for you that could be experiments for the mouth? Voice volume, pinwheels. Yep. Snack, eating, using a chewy, juice cubes, straws, bubble, bubbles. Yep, absolutely. Drinking from a water fountain, PE, all of these are really great. So just for time's sake, let's shift to an inside body part. How about the heart? Oh, and Brittany, see, I see you saying musical instruments for mouth. That's great. So how about the heart? PE, jumping on a trampoline, walks, recess, swinging. Yes, yes, yes. Belly on yoga ball, red light, green light, fire drill, touching their necks to feel their heartbeat, transitions. These are all awesome. Feeling apprehensive about a task. Yes, all of these are great. So there's lots and lots of opportunities here. If we just kind of keep interoception in our mind, we can offer that curiosity and really give them more practice noticing how their body part feels and describing it if they're ready. And this question came through quite a bit in the feedback from last session. So I just wanted to do a slide for the PTs, but I think this probably will apply for everyone. There's a lot of questions about how does interoception fit into physical therapy? And I feel like it's a beautiful fit. I'd love to hear from any PTs we have here of what you're thinking. This is my best guess of I'm not a PT, but like I feel like almost everything that you're doing with your clients and students are essentially focus area experiments. You're probably evoking lots of different sensations in their bodies. So can you just maybe work towards having some descriptor menus there to support your students in identifying how their body is feeling during exercises or stretching or whatever you're doing. You can be such a rich validator of their inner experience during all that you do with them. Um, you can really just keep a mind in your mind um, to really educate people about avoiding telling the student how they should feel during a certain exercise or stretch. And I hear this all the time. I really think we should challenge ourselves to update it. Like, I even noticed this like in my yoga class. My one yoga teacher, she assumes everyone should feel the same way. I have others that are very curious, but she would like say something like, you should feel a stretch down the back of your calf. And I'm like, well, I don't feel that. Like she's telling me how my body should feel. So really shifting away from saying how your body should feel during this exercise to being a little bit more cautious. And so hopefully this slide is helpful. We did a course a long time ago. I have colleagues that are working in adult chronic pain clinics, and they're even working with their PTs on shifting away from doing reps of exercises. So, um, do this exercise 20 times and they're really trying to update that and instruct their adult clients to do this exercise until they notice a certain thing about their body, like their muscle fatiguing or whatever it is. Now we have to kind of use that with caution because you could be supporting a lot of students that have muted interoceptive awareness. And so we don't want to say like do this exercise until you feel your muscles get tired because they could probably go and go and go and go to the point of maybe even possible injury. So just use that with caution. It's just kind of a nugget of I thought that was kind of interesting that PT clinic was trying to shift to more of a body focused approach. So I hope this slide is kind of helpful. I feel like interoception work fits into so many different disciplines in very different ways, and we can all bring our own insight to this experience. So this brings me to the last part, and I do have some mini case studies to problem solve with, but I just wanted to take one more pause to see if there's any questions.
Well, I don't know. I think you've given lots of ideas, as you said, going across different stakeholder groups and student populations. Tim asked, anything in particular for working with students with deaf blindness?
Yeah, I would just adapt this work in the same way that you adapt anything else for that student population. I mean, that's going to look different probably for each student, but really think about like how do they best learn? How are the other materials adapted for them? And then I would really use that lens to think about how can you offer interoception in a way that's meaningful to them.
And I just wanted to add the comment that Alyssa said early on about they're working with students with self-advocacy. And I love that. It's amazing, but really being self-aware and then helping kids know what they need and advocate. Anything you'd like to add to that, Kelly?
Yes. I mean, you have to understand your body in order to be able to advocate for what you need. And I love that so much. And sometimes half of my battle is then convincing other stakeholders to give them what they're actually advocating for. Like that's another, part of the puzzle, to shift those systems when someone, is expressing something about their internal experience. How do I work with my colleagues in validating that in the best way that we can?
And then Sydney adds that as a PT student, she's in outpatient ortho clinics asking patients what their symptoms feel like, shows a difference in interoception as adults. And so she's done presentation and has wowed her peeps.
Yay. Wait, is that, hi, Katie? I know Katie O'Day. Katie and I are writing a chapter on neuroaffirming occupational therapy, on trauma and interoception. So, yay.
I sense another session in the future.
Okay, would you
I
like
think
me?
that's it for now.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
just I meant to go back. Okay, do you want me to do some more mini case studies and we can work through them together as a group?
I love that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so these are just some frequent flyer case studies that I kind of pulled out and thought about. So students that hesitate to participate in focus area experiments. So I just wanted you to kind of think through like maybe the whys behind why they're hesitating, refusing to participate, and how you might adapt them. And Sarah, yes. I'll get to that next. She's asking if we can talk about I don't know friends because I have a lot of I don't know friends. But let's start with the hesitation, like or refusals. Like you're offering this super fun experiment, and they're like, no. So why? Like, what are some reasons why you might see hesitation or refusal, and what would you do to kind of adapt or adjust? Kathy's saying sometimes they need to see something many, many times before they can trust it. Absolutely. That's where that modeling comes in. And, sometimes my students, like so many of them that are like the hesitators, especially if we're doing group work, I just let them go. Like, it's cool. Like, you participate in the way that's meaningful to you, whether that's like watching from afar. And almost always, those kids usually come and join after I respect their internal experience and that hesitation. Britt saying they may be already overstimulated. Try a calmer or individual setting. I love that you're thinking about the setting and how can you adapt the environment to improve the outcome. Sarah, model it. Absolutely. Gina, I would move on to another idea and see if they're open to it. Yeah, so maybe there's just like a problem with the experiment for them and it's a mismatch for their comfort level. So see if a different experiment is a better match. Kirsten, students who have sensory sensitivity feel uncomfortable trying new experiences. Absolutely. Becky, you need to validate. Absolutely. Britt, if there are materials, letting them choose something they're curious about and start with that experiment first. I love these ideas. These are so good. Um, yeah, Sydney, the student may already have hypersensitivity. Jessica, visuals and pre-teaching can help set the stage. Yeah, so maybe they need more predictability and structure. Kathy, trust is a huge for some students with sensory issues. Yes, I feel like trust is a very big reason why I see hesitation and refusal many times. It's also often due to all of these other things too, but I need to build that trust for sure. Laurie, telling them about it a day ahead and tell them the questions you will be asking. I love that. Previewing. Kirsten, I have one student who says he will imagine what it would feel like rather than trying the experiment. Is that okay? I feel like we need to honor his experience and validate it. And I'm wondering if he ever will be comfortable testing his hypothesis. Like, so he's making a hypothesis about how it might feel in his body. Would he be willing to test it and see what happens? Like, I would try to like gently coax him, but if it's like an adamant, like, I know this is going to make me feel uncomfortable, we need to definitely validate that for sure. And like if he also hypothesizes something like that's going to make my hand feel like something uncomfortable for him, then maybe you can also work through like, okay, like what, the scientific method, I guess, kind of like I'm just kind of riffing with that, but like how can you adapt the task to make it maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, and then let's test that and see what happens. So, I mean, there's so much like curiosity there. Yes, pull the scientist in our kids for sure. Okay, let's go to the question that we had in the chat. Someone was asking if the I don't know kids, and what that means is if you're trying experiments, there are a lot of kids that are going to tell you that they don't know how their body feels. And that is often a genuine answer. They don't know how their body feels. And so, just some things I keep in my mind to drive my problem solving there. They just might need me to keep validating. Okay, that's cool if you don't know. Like they just need to see if I'm going to be a consistent responder, that I'm going to validate what they're telling me about their experience before they're ready to share something more. They might have had experiences in the past where their inner experience was dismissed or gaslighted, and so to share that with somebody else is like that takes a lot of courage. So they need to see that I'm going to just be like validating every single I don't know that they hear. Sometimes too, it's because the experiment isn't quite strong enough, like that sensation, it's not evoking a strong enough sensation. So for some of those kids, like you really have to use clinical reasoning here, but I might try to do something even stronger, like that evokes even more intensity to see if that helps them to notice something in that body part. Also, if I have a good relationship with the I don't knower, I might say, okay, cool. Like you don't know how your hands feel, but I'm wondering if you notice something else. And I'll try to like point them to the descriptor menu um, and see if I can start to generate, like I'm still accepting their answer, but I'm also seeing if they notice something else. And I do that also a lot with the kids that say, like, for every experiment, my hands feel good. My hands feel good. My hands feel good for this one. They feel good for this one, or they feel normal, or they feel okay. Like these are the kids, like a lot of times they're first of all conditioned to tell people that they feel good, right? Um, and a lot of times, again, it takes courage to share something more about their internal experience. Maybe they don't know anything beyond that it feels comfortable or uncomfortable. Like there's so many curiosities there that I always try to unpack if I can. Yeah, Kirsten, I get the fines too. Yeah, absolutely. So then I'll be like, okay, cool. Like this felt fine to your hands. And what else did you notice? Did you notice anything else? And I'll like see if I can like pull out anything else. And if I can't, that's okay. I'm still going to validate that. All right. So should we do one more? Or do you want to wrap up? I know we only have 5 minutes left, Deb.
I think one more, I think sure. I know we have one announcement from Katie at the end I'd love to make sure we have time for, but other than that, dive on in there.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I don't know. Anyone want to pick the one I that we do? We have some non-speaking the autistic support. Okay, so I see Kathy and Heather. All right, let's try to combine these. So maybe they're non-speaking autistic students, or maybe they do have access to mouth words, but they still have the autistic neurology. So let's say you're in a classroom and you have all this knowledge now. And what I see happening a lot in these classrooms is like they're working on rote teaching of emotion words, like with trials of like flashcards and emotion posters, and they're labeling the students' emotions on the daily, and they're like showing this is this picture, this is happy, smile equals happy, which is very misleading because you could be smiling and not be happy, or you could be happy and not be smiling. So there's a whole issue with this, and I have done this so much. I can't even tell you. I've done flashcards, I've done it all. So I updated myself in this area, still work in progress. What would you do? Like you're in this scenario, and maybe even the students, even worse, are non-speaking, or maybe they're scripting and they're just memorizing and spitting back out that they're happy. And every time someone asks them how they're feeling, they're happy. So what do you do? Like, what are you going to shift? What are some things you're thinking about? There's a lot to unpack here. Where would you start? Sydney, ask them what today's happy or this happy feels like. Awesome. Where do you feel happy? Yes, I love that. Start to try to unpack exactly how they're feeling. Laurie, staff training. Yes, staff training for sure with ice cubes, hot hands, etc. Modeling. Yes, 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 Kathy. Michelle, we started creating a 5-point scale with body sensations. That's an awesome idea, Michelle. So really trying to bring the interoception to light here, kind of getting away from those memorized forms of learning about emotions and really trying, it's very complicated, especially with some of our students that can't tell us exactly everything that's happening, to make this more individualized, but even just this knowledge of shifting can be really very helpful. Kara, using sensation words first. Yes, I sometimes with my clients that are really complex, I sometimes we don't even use emotion words. We go right from the way my body feels to what action my body needs. And we can talk a little bit about that next session if you want. So we're kind of taking those abstract emotion words completely out of it. So starting with those body signals first, and then we might just go right to the action piece. And Sarah's saying I'm working with encouraging adults in classrooms to over exaggerate their body feelings and emotions to model language is awesome. All right. And then finally, I see Deb with the feedback survey. So I'll turn things over to you, Deb. Thank you.
Okay. And Katie's last remark about going to the basics, using opposing feelings, helping to know what it is by knowing what it isn't, perhaps. Again, Kelly, you are so appreciated. What you bring just keeps us on the edge of our seat, and that hour flies by. So we certainly look forward to seeing you again in April. Everybody take this, share broadly. I think we know how important these conversations are and appreciate what you do. Bring those stories back to us again in April. And thank you for all that you do every day. Take care, everybody.